Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I will give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I would like to introduce you to Kelly. She is a former and future political candidate who speaks online and sparks conversation with various people about the political process, her life, being a foster parent, just so many good things. I found her on TikTok and find her energy just amazing. So I'm super excited for her to be here today. So, Kelly, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. So, yes, I just recently ran for the Arkansas State House and I did not win, unfortunately, but I had a heck of a time running and I definitely plan to run for something. Again, that position is yet to be determined. I am a stay at home mom. Currently, we have 6 children at home. We have one adult son who's out of the house. So that's 7 sons total. And a few of those we adopted out of the foster care system. And we fostered several others that were able to be reunified with family. And so that's sort of where my desire to run for office stemmed a little bit. I'm also a graduate student. And so that's sort of what my life is like right now. It's pretty exciting.
Awesome. You sound very busy. So, how did your personal life stem you into running for an office?
Right. Well, for a long time, I did not pay any attention to politics. I found it very overwhelming. I found it very divisive. It didn't sound fun, and I like to have fun. And I just didn't really like what I was seeing. But mostly, I felt like I didn't have the time to contribute to understand everything that was going on. And I'm very much an all in or all out kind of person. And if I'm going to be interested in something, I want to know everything about it. And since I didn't feel like I could do that with politics, I just sort of turned the other way and didn't pay any attention. And then I began to see the privilege in that politics didn't really impact me very much. And I was annoyed with myself as a voter that I always voted. I would go to the voting booth and there were several races that I didn't know who any of the candidates were. I didn't know what the issues were about. And I thought, gosh, this is embarrassing. I need to be an informed voter. So over the past year and a half or two, I just started paying a whole lot more attention and got really sucked into it, really interested in it. And then back to that go big or go home mentality, I got enough into it that I decided, heck, I'm gonna run. So in my area, when people started announcing who was running for representative, there was not a Democrat stepping up to run in my district. There were several Republicans, and there was a Republican primary, ended up being a runoff, but there was no Democrat. And so I said, you know what? I volunteer as tribute. I'll step up and run for it. And it really just kind of happened just that fast.
And what is it like to run a political campaign?
It was a wild ride, and especially having done it during COVID, which nobody's, except for all the people who did it this last round, no one's run for office during a pandemic that we know. And so at the beginning, I thought, okay, I just want people to have an option on the ballot. I'm just going to put myself on there, and whatever I can contribute to this race, I will contribute to this race. And, I was a mom and I was a student as well. And so some weeks that was a couple of hours, some weeks it was a full 40 hours of into the campaign. And then when COVID hit, it was like, oh, okay, all the events we wanted to do are canceled. All the knocking on doors is canceled. And so that's how I started really campaigning on social media, which is what my campaign kind of turned into.
And what sort of things were you doing on social media and were you able to get like the local viewers? Because obviously, like with TikTok, like I live in Pennsylvania, you were running in Arkansas and I found you after the fact. So how was social media affecting your campaign?
Well, it was really interesting. I set up a campaign Facebook and a campaign Twitter and Instagram. I set up TikTok for myself because it was the pandemic and I was kind of stuck at home and it was just a weird time and I just enjoyed the app. I liked scrolling and seeing what people were doing. And then I would see, some of those TikToks where people throw the words up to the beats of the music and I thought, ooh, you could explain a platform really simply here, or you could touch on certain specific topics and really hone in on the high points really quickly. And that could be appealing to young voters and to people who used to be like me, who didn't want to spend a lot of time understanding politics. You could make it simple. So I started making just a few little TikToks here and there on TikTok with all 30 of my followers, and would just post it on Twitter or post it on Facebook. I was using TikTok as a content creator for elsewhere. And so I was started out with just like, hey, here's what my platform is. I care about education. I care about healthcare, that kind of stuff. And then I would expand on certain things in different TikToks. But then I would also do a bunch of the trends and try to incorporate part of my platform into that. I got really randomly lucky and had a video go pretty viral that has like 1.3 or 1.4 million views or something at this point, where I was talking about the Second Amendment. And that brought in a lot of people who gained interest in the race. And the locality of it is really interesting because sure, TikTok does spread it all over the place, but it also does some geographical stuff with the algorithm as well. And so I would have people all the time be like, oh my God, I'm in your district. I didn't even know you were running. And then what was even weirder is I would bump into people locally who said, oh, my friend from Pennsylvania sent me your TikTok and I realized that I'm in your district. So it would bounce far out and then bounce right back. And that was what was so wild to me. At one point, I did kind of an experimental TikTok. Like I said, hey, if you're in Arkansas, would you drop a thumbs up? And if you're literally in District 90 where I'm running, would you wave? And there was like 10,000 something comments on the video. It was nuts. And so the algorithm got pretty specific. If you're mentioning things like Benton County, Lowell, Arkansas, and talking about, I feel like the algorithm kind of flags it and funnels it to people who are going to get those references. It was interesting, but I do feel like I got a lot of local people involved via TikTok.
That's awesome. Now, what was it like running, before you ran, there wasn't even a Democratic candidate. So what was it like sharing your platform in an area that has historically, at least with a little bit of research I did in recent history, has been Republican?
Yes, this district has been Republican for quite some time and hasn't really had a candidate that's put up a fight in the last several years. And it was a little bizarre running for office myself because I used to be very, very conservative. And I actually I'm 38. I went back to college to finish my degree when I was 33 and spent a few years finishing that and then started working on my grad school degree. And before I started that, was already kind of examining some of these belief systems that I had and sort of reevaluating, why do I think what I think? And long story short, over the period of 7-10 years, I moved from one side of the spectrum to the other politically. But that was a pretty personal process for me. Only my closest friends knew that I was kind of changing my thoughts on some of these big topics. And so when I declared that I was running as a Democrat, a lot of the people in my area were like, whoa, girl, you mean Republican, right? Like they were really confused. And a lot of people shut me down right there because it's the South, it's Bible Belt kind of stuff. And Democrats are a little fewer and further between, or they're at least quiet about it because it's an interesting dynamic down here sometimes. And so that did make for some really interesting conversations. I'm thankful for the people who were willing to listen to why I had changed my mind on some things. I am a person of faith, and that impacted that journey. And so I really appreciate people just having open minds to, hey, you can be a Christian and think this about this and also this about this, and we can all still be Christians. So it was a wild ride for sure.
And would you be able to or willing to share some of those beliefs that changed and a little bit of that personal process?
For sure. I think part of what started it is I actually was not raised super conservative. One of my parents is pretty liberal. Actually, the other one's pretty moderate. But I was sort of raised in that we don't really do a whole lot of. I don't remember my parents talking about politics. Maybe they did, but I wasn't paying attention to that. And it was one of those more polite things, like we don't ask people who they voted for. And then as we've grown up, it's gotten more open. A lot of people have anyway. But when I was a teenager, my friend group was really involved in a pretty conservative youth group. And I just sort of fell in with this group of friends and just kind of became very conservative. And that's just such a moldable age. And whatever I was being taught there, I just sort of absorbed and didn't question it because I trusted everybody who was talking to me. So I don't really feel like I made those decisions myself as far as becoming super conservative. And like I said, I was not particularly political, but hindsight, I can look back and be like, oh, 20-year-old me definitely would have voted Republican, because I didn't know really what I was thinking at the time. But then in my mid to late 20s, and I started meeting more people who were not like me, who were not the same color as me, who identified as, part of the LGBTQ plus community, I realized that my belief systems were really hurtful to some of these communities. And I consider myself a very loving and kind person, and that is the basis of Christianity. And I thought, this doesn't settle to me, so I'm going to have to tear this all down, start from scratch, and figure out what I think for myself. And it was quite a process. I did a lot of reading and listening to voices that weren't like mine, and just seeking out different opinions, and just sort of landed, like I said, on the other side of the spectrum.
Awesome. I appreciate your willingness to share that. And I know you've shared a little bit of it on TikTok as well. I think you know, having a moment where you could be introspective about that is really important. So I think it's great that you're able to share that.
Definitely. I think one of the other really big things that's worth noting, as far as for people in my area in the Republican Party, is abortion is a really, really huge issue. And a lot of people are single issue voters over abortion. And that's a difficult thing for people to discuss in the Christian community. And it was a difficult thing for me to grapple with in the beginning as well, because again, 20-year-old Kelly would have thought very differently about this. But when we get to like critically thinking, okay, like why is abortion a problem? Well, abortion is a problem because we've got people who are experiencing unplanned pregnancies. We've got people who are experiencing systemic poverty, who don't have the resources. We've got people who are not educated as to how people get pregnant. And I know that people literally can't believe that when they hear it, but it is just true. We need comprehensive sex education. The research is astounding if you wanted to dive into that. The pregnancy rates elsewhere are so much lower where there's comprehensive sex education. And so I am not pro abortion, but I am pro, hey, let's prevent unplanned pregnancies. And that's one of the things that I try to do on TikTok is, hey, let's gather where we can have some common interests. I'm not going to sit here and argue the morality of abortion with you, because we're not going to get anywhere with that. But if we can both agree, hey, nobody wants more abortions. Like I don't know those people. So let's just put the motivations aside and focus on the shared goal. And the way we achieve that goal is education, prevention, access to healthcare, that kind of stuff. And so trying to make it a less polarizing conversation, hopefully, has been helpful. But that's a big part, a big concern about people around here.
Definitely. And I know I'm in a very Republican county, so I know a little bit of what you're experiencing, and being in a swing state, even more so importantly in the presidential election. But even, as to you saying, bringing the conversation to a bit of an equal ground and saying, like, why do we think this? But like, we all, want the same thing. It's just we're approaching it in different measures. And I think our biggest issue, there are a lot of big issues in Pennsylvania, but one of our biggest is the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
It was extremely foreign to me when I moved to Pennsylvania and they got off school for the first day of hunting. And I was like, what do you mean Thanksgiving break is longer? Like, why do they need this? So yeah, one policy, voting is definitely a big issue.
Yes, guns are an equally big issue here. I got flagged as like a radical left agenda gun grabbing Democrat here, which is just laughable because we have a ton of guns. Like it's kind of ridiculous. And so I was just advocating for common sense gun laws. I don't want to take anybody's. I had people ask me, "Are you going to take my guns?" Like, no. You think I'm going to personally show up and take your guns? Like, give me a break. We've got plenty of guns. I don't need your guns. But people really, that has been so polarized and so misunderstood. I don't know any Democrats who are anti-Second Amendment, but that's how they have been labeled and branded. And I'll give the Republican Party some credit. That has been super effective. Mm-hmm. It's just not true.
Right, exactly. Now, I'm sure it's a not great topic, but would you be able to talk about what it was like on election day when the votes were coming in?
Whew, yeah, that was brutal. So I knew going into it in the very beginning that the numbers did not look good for running as a Democrat in my area. And I did not care because I just wanted people to have an option on the ballot. I somewhere in there convinced myself that I could win because my race was very different than the race where the data had been gathered. And so that had been a pretty actual radical Democrat running against a pretty moderate incumbent. Well, in my race, the incumbent lost in the runoff. I found myself to be a pretty moderate Democrat as far as, here in Arkansas goes. And I was running against another newcomer who was more extreme. And so I thought, you know what, that data doesn't really apply too much to this situation. And it ended up being actually pretty close to those numbers. But I do think the presidential race played a lot into it. I always knew that it was an uphill battle. I had hoped that we would be a little bit closer. I think I ended up getting a little over 37% of the vote, which stung. I was really hoping that we would pull out a win or at least put up a bigger fight. So disappointing for sure, but definitely got me fired up to do it again. And naturally, after I lost, everybody's telling me, oh, lots of people lose their first races. I'm like, who was lining up to tell me that when I said I'd run for office? Nobody said lots of people lose their first races. But, it's fine. It's fine. I enjoyed campaigning and I do definitely want to try again.
And do you know what you want to try again for?
I don't, and I am keeping that door just really wide open. There are a ton of positions available. I mean, you could do state rep again, you could do state senate. There are things just up and down the ballot. There's county positions, there's statewide positions. I want to do whatever is the most useful for my party, where I can be particularly impactful. I realize at this point I have a kind of unique reach and way of communicating. And so I'm leaning on the state party a bit to guide me into what they think makes the most sense for me, because I want to do what makes the most sense for Arkansas. So I'm not in a super big hurry. I'm sure you've heard down here in Arkansas, we've got people declaring they're running for governor left and right. And we're just like, girl, calm down. Like filing is not until February of 2022. So it is still quite early. Sure, they're getting ahead on some fundraising, but I'm confident that I can fundraise for what I need to fundraise when the time comes to do it.
And what was fundraising like?
Fundraising was horribly awkward in the beginning. And honestly, I was completely disgusted by it because I hate money in politics. And when I decided, I'm sure you can tell by this story, I kind of decided to run a little bit on a whim, like, oh, no one's doing it, I'll freaking do it. And so then they were like, oh, BT dubs, it's going to be $3,000 to file. And I had a week before the filing deadline. I was like, well, forget that. And then I was like, you know what? Fine. If I can raise $3,000 in a week, I'll do it. And so I, of course, started with the richest people on my list, but I was able to raise $3,000 in a week. And I was like, well, I guess that was my fleece before the Lord, if you will. And so I went ahead and cut a $3,000 check and decided to run. But in the beginning, it was calling and asking every single person in my phone for money, which is so awkward. And most people were like, ooh, Democrat, sorry, no thanks, please don't call back. But then I had people who would be like, oh, sure, here's $300. And I was just blown away because I'd never given money to a political campaign. And that's a lot of money to me. And so it was weird. But once the TikTok started taking off, money just started rolling in because people got invested in the campaign. And I always just accredited that to the fact that people are sick of politicians. They want to see real people in office. And because I was somewhat relatable, I guess they got invested in my little tiny race here in Arkansas. And so fundraising got fun and it got a lot more easy toward the end. So I'm excited about another race to be able to hit the ground running and hopefully not have to deal with some of that awkward fundraising at the very beginning.
Awesome. Now, switching gears a little bit out of the political side, you mentioned that you've got a handful of boys and that some of them have been adopted out of the foster care system. So can you talk a little bit about expanding your family?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we married just super, super young. We met right out of high school. I was barely 20 and he was 22. And we had worked in the church nursery together and kept a couple of foster kids that we just were just obsessed with. We just thought they were the sweetest. And we thought we were going to do this one day. Well, we got married. We sought it out immediately before we even had biological kids. But at that time, there was a rule that you had to be married for 2 years first before you could foster. And so we were like, okay, well, we'll put a bookmark in that and we'll come back. And then in the meantime, we had a couple of biological children. Turns out I'm mega fertile, apparently. And so we had 3 boys in about a 5-year span. And then we're kind of reminded about foster care when the youngest was about 6 months old. And we felt like we had the space and capacity to do that. And there was still there was a huge need. We actually didn't realize at the time how huge the need was. And then when we heard that, we were like, well, let's just do this now. I know we've got all these little kids, but let's just jump in. And so we had a 5, 3, and a 1-year-old. And so we thought, hey, let's take in teenagers because that's a different kind of energy. And it's not throwing somebody in this little, sleepless mess that we've created down here. And so our first placement was a teenage girl, and we just adored her. And she stayed with us for a little over a year and a half. And then we generally kept taking in teenagers. We took a couple more young children, and we ended up adopting one of those little boys. And then had kind of it was a little bit of a surprise that we adopted a little boy that when he was 2, and the same day as the adoption came home, found out we were pregnant with our 4th biological kid. We're like, whoa, let's tap the brakes here, just a smidge. So we took a little break, built a bigger house, and then opened back up because the need is it's just so big. And once you know what's going on, it's hard not to be a part of what's happening. And so we adopted another shortly after opening again, and then took in another teenager and ended up adopting him as well. We only recently closed about a year and a half ago, a little before the campaign, so that we could. Well, honestly, we ran out of space. Let's be real. You can only have so many literal children in your home. So we're kind of capped out at the moment, but it was just, we felt like this is a need in our community. It's something that we enjoy doing and we feel like we can do. Our kids enjoyed the process, and I highly recommend it. It's just a huge need.
Yeah, and what is it like having teenagers and so fostering teenagers, but then also having biological children at home? Were there ever any issues with all of a sudden having teenagers when you hadn't even experienced the age 6 through 10?
Right. And I think that's a lot of the reason that people don't want to foster teenagers is they feel just ill-equipped, like I haven't parented teenagers. But here's the deal. When you have biological kids, you haven't parented teenagers until they're teenagers. And so I feel like the logic is kind of flawed. Like, well, I'm not going to know what I'm doing when they're teenagers. I don't know what I'm doing now. So let's just jump in and do the best that we can. And when we had teenagers, foster kids, we would just say up front, like, listen, we realize that we're in our 20s, our early 30s. We're not professionals here and we want to work with you, but we realize we're going to screw this up. And so if you can come to us and we'll talk occasionally about what's working and what's not, and we'll figure this out together. Most of our teenagers, I think, enjoyed having young foster parents because we were, we're older now, but at the time we were teenagers not that long before. I think when we took in our first teenager, I was like 26 or 27. So we were really young, but we enjoyed it. Fostering teens is so unique because they can talk to you about what's going on. They can talk to you about how they feel about it. You can teach them coping skills that they can learn quickly. You can teach them how to cook meals and how to, there's more instant gratification with fostering teenagers because you can actually help equip them to be adults. Now, I always try to be real careful to not be too sunshine and rainbows about it. Like, obviously, kids from trauma are going to have some trauma behaviors, but I'm always encouraging people, if this is something you're interested in, something you feel led to do, you're going to learn how to deal with all those issues in training, and you're going to learn all the safety precautions and things that you need to watch out for. But our experiences were very pleasant. Our younger kids loved having older kids around. I mean, most little kids think teenagers are awesome, and that was always our experience in our home. And so it was really kind of a neat thing for the kids to get to experience too. And what better way to show biological or adopted children how to love on your community than to literally take people into your home, share your parents, share your space, share your toys, whatever it may be, for the sake of helping another human through a tough time. And so we loved it.
And now, do you and your husband come from large families as well?
No, my husband has one brother and I have one brother and one sister. I always wanted a big family. I think he probably would have had one or two kids and been, but I was just like, hey, let's keep this party going. And he's pretty chill and laid back, obviously. He just kept going with the flow. So now here we are.
Great. And now you mentioned that you're in grad school. So what was it like going back to school a little bit later and what have you been studying in grad school?
So I went back as in my early 30s to finish my I just had never finished because I stopped and had a baby. I had changed my major a lot and couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. So I ended up graduating with a psychology degree when I was 34, and then decided I wanted to go into social work. And I love the master's in social work program because you can do a whole lot of things with it. There's a million different jobs for social workers. The thing I'm working towards currently is to be on the path to become a therapist. Having been working through the foster care system, I personally have a wonderful therapist who helped with a bunch of issues that we had there, worked with a bunch of therapists for our children. And I just thought I want to be one of those people for somebody else. And so you can become a social worker and become a therapist. So that's what I'm currently working toward. I did take the year off for COVID because I had most of my kids virtual schooling. So I'll hop back in the fall to finish my grad degree.
And what was virtual schooling like for the kids?
It was special. I can't promise you how much they learned. We had it was a lot. They were kind of I have a lot of kids and a lot of different levels of kids. So my oldest at home is a freshman in high school, and then the youngest is in pre-K. And so it was a lot of different content, and I was trying to kind of hover and help people. But the kids have honestly been pretty independent and done a pretty great job. Every now and then I'd hear from a teacher like, "Hey girl, they didn't do this." And I'd be like, shoot, sorry, that's on me. Let me let me double check. I was not the best virtual school facilitator. For the spring semester, I basically gave all the kids an option because I was actually pretty thrilled with how the school handled COVID and the protocols and stuff. And I was like, hey, who wants to go back to school? And 4 out of 6 of them missed their friends and wanted to be there. And then 2 that my middle ones decided they were thriving in virtual school, doing really well. And I was like, cool, do your thing. So now I've got 4 in school and 2 at home. We're just sort of going with the flow over here. Whatever works. It's a pandemic.
Sounds a little bit more manageable. And what is it like, being a stay-at-home mom?
It's busy. It can be a bit of a thankless job. I've been a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and that was always what I wanted to be. And it was only as my kids have gotten a little bit older, need me just a little bit less, that I was just like, I want to kind of do my own thing too, and I'm going to see what that looks like. And then the therapist idea hit me, and it was also the going back to social work that led me into politics as well. I mean, I've already mentioned that, hey, nobody was running, but during that same season, I was in a social work policy class, and we're talking about politics and, giving presentations in other classes, and just thinking like, oh, I want to be a part of a solution here. I don't just want to talk about these problems. I want to be at the table where we're fixing these problems. And so everything sort of happened at the same time that led to running a campaign. So I feel like I kind of went from, hey, I've been a stay-at-home mom and only a stay-at-home mom for a really long time. And now I'm a grad student and running a campaign and trying to do all these, I'm not pretending I'm homeschooling, but like facilitating their schooling. It's been a weird, wild year for sure.
Definitely. And it seems, you've been rolling with the punches and taking it as you can.
I try.
So what else would you want to share with the listeners about your life? What do you think needs to be heard?
Well, that is a great question. I think that we just need to be, obviously right now I'm into politics. I think that we can see a lot of change if we will just have more conversation, make it a little bit less polarizing. I'm not just trying to be relatable. I hope that I actually am I'm just a mom like a lot of other people. I'm a student like a lot of other people. I'm, trying to raise kids and teach them to be good humans. I want them to be safe at school. It's why I'm really passionate about some of the gun policies. And so I just think if we can make politics a little bit less elite, so that people realize, hey, you and me can have these conversations. You and me can be informed voters. You could actually run for office. Just I'm not saying water it down, but make it more accessible. And that's what I love about TikTok is it makes things accessible for people in short snippets where you can understand what's going on and you've not spent your whole day researching. You watched a 60-second video and you're able to be a little bit more caught up. So I want to have conversations about these hard things like guns, like abortion, like taxes and the stuff that stresses people out so that we can bring it down to the base level and figure out where we can go from there to work together.
Yeah, I definitely resonated earlier when you were talking about how you didn't you didn't like politics, you didn't want to be involved. It's very anxiety driven. And I've probably even said on the podcast that that has been my viewpoint on politics, but definitely in the past 2 years, I've been hearing a lot more understanding why, as you even said, that is a privileged place to be.
Yeah.
And it's still stressful, but I can at least be more aware and listening to the conversations more. Now, you aren't in office. So what are you doing to help see change?
Yeah. Yeah. That was one of the things after the election night. Like, okay, what do I do with myself now before the next election cycle? And one of the things that I saw lacking in the previous election cycle was just general voter education. Like a lot of people went down and just, voted for the people in their party down the ticket without having a clue what any of those people really stood for. And so I'm just focusing on voter education, platform education, talking about these things and making them more accessible. I'm hoping to help get more voters registered, getting young people interested in the process. I'm convinced that in Arkansas, there are a lot of Democratic voters that just don't bother to go to the polls because we are deemed such a red state and, oh, we'll never change. We're always like this, which is such baloney because less than 10 years ago, we were a completely blue state. And so I just can't stand it when people are like, oh, it is the way that it is and it's always going to be that way, because no. And in the same way, once we got involved in foster care, it was hard for me to not be involved in foster care because I knew too much. Now that I've gotten involved in politics, I can't just shut it off. I see how important this is and that it's impacting real people's lives. And we need good people in there advocating for our more vulnerable populations who are not able to advocate for themselves necessarily.
Since we're not in an election cycle right now, is it difficult to educate people and get people motivated to want to register or want to vote the next time they are able to?
Well, I think it's been actually kind of interesting here because we're in the legislative session right now in Arkansas. So bills are being presented, bills are being voted on, people are going down to the Capitol to testify for bills. And so what I'm specifically doing right now is I'm covering the bills that I find interesting or the most important for our state and just letting people know, hey, FYI, this bill is hitting a committee tomorrow. Here's what it says. Because some of the legalese in these bills is overwhelming. I'm doing a lot of research to make sure that I'm adequately and accurately explaining the bills and then explaining here's who you can call, here's how you find out who your representative is. And I think it makes people feel empowered. Oh, I didn't know that this was happening. I just thought I was voting for somebody who was looking out for my best interest, but this is actually not in my best interest. And so that's my goal, is to let people know here's what's happening behind the scenes. We got to get involved now and we got to get to the polls for the next time so that we're not in this situation again. Because we're going to pass some funky legislation, let me tell you, because the Republicans have a supermajority and I'm not anti-Republican. I don't ever want that to be the thing, but we've got some extreme politicians in Arkansas right now. And I think that if we can all be a little more chill, a little more moderate, we could meet in the middle and come up with some good legislation that is good for the majority of Arkansans.
Yeah. Now, have you made connections with other political people who are currently in office that you're able to stay connected even closer?
Yes, and that's been fun too, because that's another thing. I've just always thought that politics were a super elite thing, like these people are just untouchable. And now a lot of these legislators are like my friends. I text them and I'm like, "Well, what is my life right now? This is so cool. I know that person." So it's really fun. Especially on Twitter is where I interact with a lot of those people. And every now and then I'll get, someone will retweet me and I'm like, "Oh my God, they're such a cool kid." They don't know that I'm fangirling out right now that they're retweeting me, but these most politicians are actually at the state level can be pretty accessible to the general population if you know who you're looking for and how to track them down. So that's been a really neat part of the process for me too, because it's not at all like I assumed it was.
Definitely. Now, what was social media like for you in a political campaign?
It was mostly super fun. I enjoyed social media before campaigning, and I've always had Facebook and Instagram and all this kind of stuff, but I've never been controversial in any capacity until my election. And so that was new for me. I've never really, I'm a pretty likable person. I've been a pretty nice person. But then when you come out with like opinions, especially as a female, some people don't like it when girls have opinions. And so that dealing with the hate and the trolls was a little bit like uncharted territory for me. I tried to usually just look at it as, oh, this is flattering. I'm getting some people a little bit nervous. But that was I definitely grew some thicker skin through the election cycle, because it was a weird thing to get that kind of feedback, because that's just not something that I've ever experienced in my life. I've just not ever been a controversial person, but apparently having opinions is in fact controversial. So that was that was new.
Yes, when all of a sudden you're reaching a lot more people, things might say on the offhand actually become important.
Yeah, yeah. And I did try to be I was very thoughtful and mindful about how I worded certain things, but there are some things that are just going to upset people no matter how you put it. Things are going to be taken out of context no matter how you put it. And I put out a lot of social media content, so it's not hard to pull something and make it say what you want it to say. But hopefully my personality is coming through and my intent is coming through, and I felt like that was the case 99.9% of the time. But it did, when you do have a couple of things go viral and people come out of the woodwork to let you know just how much they hate you, it's a special time. You got to take a break every now and then.
Yes, I always see people who are so constantly on social media, and maybe it's like their full-time life, and it's like it's okay to take breaks. Like your supporters will still be here when you come
Yeah.
back.
Yes, and I certainly did try to do that, and I could tell there's a point where it would stress if it's starting to stress me out, like, okay, time to take a breather. And I faced a little bit of criticism toward the end about like, oh, well, you only did TikTok. Well, you know what? If you only thought I did TikTok, then maybe you were only doing TikTok, because I also was dropping literature on doors. I was doing radio ads. I was able to do a TV commercial. I was making phone calls nonstop. Like I did all of the other things. It was just the TikTok and social media that got the most attention. And so it wasn't that I wasn't doing the typical cookie cutter campaign stuff. It just looked a little bit different during a pandemic.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, you might have had some reactions because you're a woman, but you're in a house full of boys. So what is that like?
It was fun. I also have kind of an androgynous name. Kelly is a girl's or a guy's name, and so I had Kelly Krout t-shirts, and my boys would go out and about, and people would be like, "Oh, is your daddy running for office?" And they were like, dude, it's my mom. And I feel like I'm raising a bunch of little feminists. That was a lot of fun for me. But I feel like it was kind of funny as a left-leaning candidate, because if you were to look up my family picture, I look quite conservative. I've got a lot of children, and so I have lived my life in a very pro-life fashion. Like I've got a lot of kids, I've adopted kids, I'm advocating for this community. And so I think it was kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around, like, wait, this person is pro-choice, but she's also this and this. And so it was kind of fun to mess with people a little bit. But my kids were just super, super supportive. They got a kick out of it. And I hope they enjoy the next round as much.
Yeah, and there will be a little bit of time, so they'll definitely be older and all of that. What was it like doing a TV commercial?
Oh my gosh, we had so much fun with that. The kids thought they were super famous, and that was not something that we ever planned to do, but we were able to do so much fundraising in that last month that we had already checked all the other things off our list that we wanted to do, about like sending out mail and doing the radio ads and whatnot. And so I kind of pitched the idea, like, I know this sounds a little bonkers, but what if we did a commercial? And they're like, well, we've got the money to do it. And this allows people to hear your voice, because that's when you don't hear my voice on a mailer, and you can't necessarily always get to know someone via social media. So it was neat to get to show, my family a little bit and how we operate. And I can tell you honestly that the commercial was pretty accurate representation of what our house is like. I mean, the kids are wrestling and running around, and I mean, it's a little rambunctious here. I can't believe I've not been interrupted. Like, this is a shocking thing to me. My husband must be wrangling everybody pretty well in there. But we had a good time with that. I mean, it was kind of funny, and I like to be funny. So I felt like it, showed our personalities pretty well.
So we packed a lot in here because, as you said before we started recording, you are a fast talker. I have people who listen on, like 1.5 speeds or whatever it is. And after my first episode, they were like, I can't do it. Like, so the pie happened with this one too, but that is definitely okay. That's why the technology exists, to be able to speed or slow down podcasts.
Perfect. Yeah.
So with all of my guests, I end out with a different sort of question at the end. And we haven't talked about this, and I don't even know from TikTok. But I'm kind of guessing that you are someone that likes to read. Is that correct?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
So my question is like, what is your favorite book, your favorite author, your favorite series, whatever in the literature world that sparks joy?
Oh, great question. I tend to lean towards nonfiction and kind of feminist empowering type stuff. Glennon Doyle is one of my favorites. Brene Brown, one of my favorites. And I love stuff like that. But then sometimes I just need more of a brain break, and I like to listen to audiobooks that are fiction. I just finished Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, and that was a fun listen. I listened to The Silent Patient last year, and that was more of kind of a psychological thriller. I like a lot of different things, and it's a nice break for me. When I catch myself getting too into social media and worrying too much about what's going on, I'm like, I need to stop and read a dadgum book. And so that is what I do. So I try to read physical nonfiction and listen to fiction. And I like to run, so I can listen to a lot of books in a year while I'm on the pavement. So.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. I will be leaving some of Kelly's social media in the description, so if you want to check her out on TikTok, that's of course how I know her, and also on Twitter, her personal and she still has her political Twitter up and running, so she posts some of that stuff that she talks about with different policies and things like that. So all of those handles will be in the description, and if you'd like to connect with the podcast, all of that information is also there: Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, LinkedIn, and of course the email. So if you want to get in touch with me, if you would like to guest, I'm always looking for new people and love hearing new stories. So it's been great to connect with Kelly today. I've learned so much and had such a great time. So thank you so much, Kelly, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to meeting a bunch of you along the way through the social media stuff, and stay tuned to see what I decide to run for next time.